started on the season or what?
I'm ready.
It should be a good one. We had a little bit of an echo there. Didn't turn the audio down on the preview menu, so I think we got it fixed. But we're ready to rock and roll. We're going to start off by going over 2017 and take a look at what we did there. We tried to go over this. We didn't have time to fully go back through all of our picks, but I believe someone in this studio picked the Houston Texans to win the Super Bowl, and they got there, but they didn't win it. Who did you pick to win the Super Bowl? I don't remember. Refresh us.
I think I might have picked Carolina. Maybe.
Ooh, that was a bad pick.
Carolina or Minnesota might have been. I think they were up there.
Yeah, I don't know. Nobody picked. How did nobody pick the Seahawks? And the Seahawks actually. Seahawks actually won it, and that's a. I don't know. I don't know how we did that. So Wolfman in there saying never pick Madge. What is he? Does he ever say anything nice to me? Why do we even keep him around? He's always so.
Who let him in?
Well, that was my fault apparently.
Oh. You didn't do your bouncer duties right, I guess.
Yeah, I did not. That was a miss on my part for sure. So recapping 2017, we have the standings up there. The Texans, Browns, and Broncos all finished 13-3. Patriots 11-5. The Jets and the Steelers, I believe, were the playoff teams. Is that right?
That would be right. Yeah. Okay.
And then so we had the AFC Championship showdown between the Texans and the Browns, and the Texans came away on top, made it to the Super Bowl. And in the NFC, we had the NFC was really weird because we had 3 teams at 15-1, and we actually should have had the Cardinals at 14-2. So a very different story in the NFC, but 3 teams at 15-1. And we had the Cardinals, Giants, and the Redskins made the playoffs. And we had the Seahawks and the Cardinals actually got to the NFC Championship game. Am I right there?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And DSP's got an echo now. When does his stuff ever function correctly? he's always got some kind of issue.
It's
somewhere.
a DSP problem. I just write it off as DSP's against the norm, and move on.
Not much we can do there, but it's probably his girlfriend's internet connection. So anyway, the NFC, we had the Seahawks and the Cardinals, division rivals, actually got to the NFC Championship game. Seahawks won and set up the Super Bowl with Seahawks and the Texans, and we did the live play-by-play with that one. It was a great game, battled down to the end. The Seahawks wind up coming away victorious in a wild game, and so you got to think that there are odds-on favorite to repeat. But before we get there, we're gonna go through each individual team one by one, and we'll go on to the AFC North. We'll start there for 2018. David, you got the Browns, followed by the Ravens, which is somewhat of a surprise pick. We both got the Steelers in 3, and then we alternate Bengals and Ravens. Give us a quick rundown of why you got the Browns repeating, and why did you decide to go with the Ravens over the Bengals for number 2?
Well, the Browns, I think, are going to repeat. Deshaun Kaiser should have improved off of last year. I think I love what Cleveland did in the offseason. They improved their speed at the linebacking core, brought in Avery Williamson to play at middle linebacker. In terms of Baltimore finishing at second and Cincinnati finishing last, I don't like the draft that Cincinnati had. They brought in a couple of question marks at players. Now, they had a couple of good pieces. Don't get me wrong, but I just think there are a lot of question marks in Cincinnati as opposed to what Baltimore has going for them.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Skyballer's the owner in Cincinnati. They didn't have a great draft. I don't know they had a great offseason, but I think quality user. I think he can get his stuff together, and I think it's going to be close between the Steelers and the Bengals. But I'm actually picking the Bengals to jump ahead of the Steelers. I think it's going to be close, though. I don't think, it's going to be like one of them's going to be 10-6 or 9-7, and the other one's like 6-10. I think the Bengals and Steelers are both going to be there right around 9-7, 8-8, and competing for that last spot. I'm just picking the Bengals to step ahead there. So last sniper's booing me and Chad, and rightfully so. Actually, he's booing both of us because we both got him at third. So I'm not going to absorb all the heat on that one. But he's gonna have to step up and prove that he can do it 2 years in a row, and we'll see what he's able to do if that's able to come through for him. We're going to move on to the AFC North now, which is the big division in the AFC. We've got the Texans, who are young future, obviously got to the AFC Championship game. We've got Woodsmall, who's the Jags, who has won a couple of Super Bowls here, had a rough season last year. We got Fired Up, who's always a competitor right around in that 8-8 to 11-5 range. And then we've got a new guy with the Colts, and Lee, who we don't know a whole lot about yet. The team went 0-4 in preseason, but I suspect that was because he didn't have a whole lot of availability over the weekend. So don't know what we're going to get from him. So I put him in the bottom, as did you. We both took the Texans to finish number one, but we differ on the Jags and the Titans. Tell me why you picked the Titans over the Jags and what you think the Texans are going to do this year.
Well, and Fired Up is reminding us in our lovely little Twitch chat here that the Titans are the ones who made the playoffs last year, not the Steelers.
Well, and that's why we picked the Steelers to finish third. There you go, Lost Sniper.
There you go. That's the explanation right there. But Fired Up has lost a couple of pieces. I think he's also been able to add a few nice pieces. Arden Key is a great defensive end pick in the draft. I think he's a good young defensive end that will certainly help this Titans defense. But on the flip side, Marcus Mariota, they've got to figure out a way to get him going and not turn the ball over as much. Had a lot of turnovers last year. I think if they can get that figured out, they have a good chance. But I think the gap between the Titans and the Jags is tight. I'm talking a one-game, half-game separation there in terms of standings. I don't think there's too much of a difference. I don't know. It's going to depend on which Jags team shows up. The Jags started off slow last year. Or actually, it wasn't the Jags. It was Woodsmall with the Texans actually last year. Started off slow, went like 5-11, I think, in the first season, and then made, I think, back-to-back Super Bowls the next 2 years. So it's hard to write him off. I do think the Texans are still the favorite to win that division, but I do think the Jags are going to pull it together. They got Josh Rosen in the draft. I think they got a quarterback they're going to like a little bit better maybe than Blake Bortles. He's had a season, an off season to kind of put together his team a little bit. I think it could be close with the Titans and the Jags. I think more so I would suspect that the Jags and Texans are going to more compete for number one, and then I expect the Titans to kind of do what they did last year and be in that 8-8, 10-6 range, competing for that last playoff spot. However, we don't know what we're going to get from the Colts. As Nighthawk pointed out in chat, that Lee made a run in the deuce at the playoffs, so he can, he could surprise. We don't know, but we do have 3 bona fide users that are playoff contenders. Hard to go against them until we see it for sure in the VIP league. So definitely going to be an interesting division to watch. And if Lee is a playoff contender, that's going to make that division really, really tough, which is sad for those guys in that division, but only going to make them better players in the long run. Moving on to the AFC East. Again, we've got, this one is the most wildly different, although it's just first and second and third and fourth is where we differ. You've got the Patriots repeating. I've got the Jets stepping up and taking it this year, and then we flip-flop on who we think is third and fourth. Walk us through your take on the AFC East this year, David. Well, I know that Jerk Wendy has lost a couple of pieces. I just don't think that Worm has picked up enough. Now, I think he'll be able to contend. I think he'll be in the playoffs once again. I just don't think he's picked up enough pieces yet to take over that first place spot away from Jerk Wendy. It's close. It's in the right direction. Baker Mayfield is going to be a huge help to that. I just don't think it's enough yet. As for the bottom half of the division, Sanch has had a little bit of an inconsistency from what I've seen. Bracco is a little bit the same way. Those two could flip-flop. I just think Rocco is a little more experienced from what I've seen. He's been able to make a comeback. We saw that in the preseason against Kansas City. He had a nice comeback late in the game to win it. I think a few lucky breaks his way will help him to come in third.
You mentioned the one thing that I'm going to say is going to be the difference maker is Baker Mayfield, which is interesting considering your picks as we get later on in this. But Baker Mayfield, I think, is going to be a difference. The one thing that we saw with the Jets this year is the inconsistency at quarterback between McCown and Hackenberg. Like, that was the one thing. The running game wasn't great, but their defense was pretty solid. But the play at quarterback was really inconsistent. They got the best quarterback in the draft, and I think that's going to be the difference. Now, I'm not saying they're going to run away with it. I think it could be the Jets at 11-5 and the Patriots at 10-6. But I do think the Jets are going to figure it out in year two with more consistency at quarterback, and they're definitely gonna pull away. As far as the bottom end, I think Sanch did a really good job in the offseason. He signed a lot of guys. You know, he got Malcolm Butler from the Patriots. He had a good draft. He had the 6 and 7 pick in the first round. He got Christian Kirk, and dang it, now I can't remember the other guy. It was a running back, right? Man, I can't remember.
It feels so long since the draft. It feels so long.
I know.
Preseason hit us hard.
Ago, but it seems like it was forever. Actually, it wasn't even a week. It was a couple days. No, it was a week because I had to do all the editing. But I feel like he had a good offseason. I think he added a lot of pieces. He put in a lot of people. Sam Darnold. He got Sam Darnold and Christian Kirk. So, you know, he added some pieces. Now, Tyrod Taylor's still going to be a starting quarterback, which is not a bad move. You know, I actually like the pick. We don't see that often in leagues like this where you take a quarterback and you can actually develop him for a year, but it looks like that's what they're going to do in Buffalo. And so Darnold will get a chance to kind of develop on the back end, and they can go with the experienced Tyrod. In the meantime, I like that. You know, Butler's going to help that secondary immensely. Christian Kirk's going to add a playmaker, both at wide receiver and kick return. So I think they'll step up. I think they could actually jump from, you know, towards the bottom of the division into, you know, fighting for a playoff. I don't know if they're at the point yet where they can compete for that top 2 spot, but I think they're going to be right in the mix, and they're going to make teams like the Texans and the Steelers or the Titans and the Steelers have to fight for that playoff spot. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch. The Dolphins, I think they're at that bottom tier. I think it's going to take them a little bit. They're trying to add some pieces. They're working on it. I think the Bills just had a better offseason. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be bad. I could see them anywhere from 6-10 to 8-8 probably. You know, they're going to be right in there. It's going to be tough. I think, you know, they could definitely move ahead of the Bills, but right now I think the Bills edge them out. But it's definitely going to be an interesting division to watch. Moving on to the last division in the AFC as we go down to the AFC West. And this one, we are exactly on the money with our picks here. We both picked it even. I don't know how that happens, especially considering you're the Chiefs. I should have picked you last just to spite you. But go ahead and walk us through. It's your division. You know them better than anybody else. Why do you think the Broncos repeat? How do you guys hold on the second? And what do you see from the Chargers and Raiders this year?
Well, I think Clutch is very talented. He went 13-3 last year. Now, let's put this in context a little bit. He had one of the easiest schedules in the league. Part of that is because of who he faced in the division. That being said, the schedule gets a lot tougher for him. He has a tough stretch of games from week 8 to week 12, week 17, actually, I think it is. So I don't think he goes 13-3 again. I think he still has the foothold in the division, but I think Kansas City, I don't think we go 4-12 again either. I think we'll improve a lot. I think part of that is because Patrick Mahomes will be the guaranteed starter day one. They add some more talent at wide receiver, so they've got way more depth there than what they had last year. You go down one receiver last year, and they seem to be completely out of receiver options. They don't have that dilemma this year. They've done a little bit of moving along the offensive line. That helps. The Chargers, they've had some nice pieces, I think, that they have enough there to work with. The Raiders come in last simply for the sake of what they did in the draft. They gave up picks to get picks for next year, which I think hurts them. They didn't get a lot of young talent that they really needed this year, and as a result of that, I think it's going to put them behind, and now they're kind of behind in their rebuild.
Yeah, kind of. It's interesting. I don't think the Raiders had as good of an offseason as they could have because they did trade away a couple picks, and they added picks next year. But I do think they have 6 picks, I believe, in the first 3 rounds. So next year's going to be a big draft. It's going to be a year that they can really turn it around for the last few seasons of the league. But I agree, it does kind of set them back this year. They did get Derwin James, though, in the draft, and that's going to be a big pick. And it's definitely going to help on that secondary, give them some options back there with Carl Joseph. So going to be interesting to see what they do. But I agree with you. I don't think they had a great offseason. I don't see them really jumping up. The Chargers, they're one of those teams that are kind of like that 6 and 6, 7 and 9 kind of team so far. Haven't seen enough from them to pick them as a playoff contender quite yet. However, with your team, we know that you've been around the playoff hunt before. So I do agree that you guys can leapfrog, not going to go 4-12. But until somebody proves otherwise, I think the Broncos are the number 1 team in that division. However, I agree with you. None of these teams that went 13-3 this year, I think, necessarily repeat. This league is going to be a lot tougher this year. The schedules are a lot more balanced. We had a little bit of turnover last year in teams, and we waited to fill some spots. So we had some CPU teams for the last several weeks. We waited to fill them until the end of the year. So that's going to be a difference that a lot of these guys aren't going to deal with. They're not going to have those CPU teams to beat up on this year that they did last year. So I think it is going to be interesting. I don't think 13-3, as we get to the NFC, 15-1 is going to be as easy as it was this year. But I do think the Broncos, like you said, they are going to be probably one of the top 3 teams. At least top 4 until somebody can knock them off. I do like Patrick Mahomes starting this year. I think it's going to be interesting to watch and kind of interested to see what he does in KC. But right now it's the Broncos division, and we'll see. I would definitely hope to see your team compete for the playoffs. I think you're one of those teams that's in there at that 7-9 to 10-6 kind of spot, and you'll be right in there with the Steelers and the Titans and those teams trying to compete and battle for those playoff spots. So definitely going to be an interesting division to watch. We'll move on to the NFC North. This one we disagree a lot on. We both have the Vikings repeating as division champs, but the next 3 teams are quite wild, to the dismay of Jersey Born, who I know is cringing when he looks at this. He's already saying to Chad he can't believe you picked the Lions to finish 4th. Go ahead and walk us through your thought process. I thought it was kind of interesting how you went about that, but talk us through how you see the NFC North unfolding this year.
Well, I think Minnesota has the foothold right there. We've seen Gone Fishing last year, went 15-1, the pass rush, all of that, all those good things. Dalvin Cook obviously is a big part of that. They've got the full benefit of the doubt at this point that they will take league. Detroit coming in last place with they're calling for my head in the chat. I see. I can see it now.
Jersey just quit the league. Burns gets the pitchfork. So you definitely opened up a can of worms with these predictions.
Well, hopefully, let them take this as a motivational tool. The offensive line didn't play up to snuff last year. I know Jersey kind of came in a little bit later. I spoke to him before all this, and I told him, I had to pick one team that I just had to absolutely aggravate. I chose to antagonize him, mainly because of the boring way he wins games, apparently. So, I said, you know what? I'm going to put him at the bottom until I see a little bit of excitement out of his play style a little bit. I think Peyton has enough to do some good work. Trubisky should step up this year. They've got a lot of talent at running back. I think Pat can improve quite a bit. And I'll see that, Aaron Rodgers, of course, is always a threat worthy of that.
Yeah, this is one of those divisions that was really interesting. And I hate doing it because one of these, the Packers are one of those teams, honestly, that if I could put on my my watch list for surprise teams this year, I actually think the Packers are going to step up. Pack had a rough year last year. He didn't win one game himself. He had a sim game that he went 1-15, wound up with the number 2 pick in the draft. But it was an aberration. You know, he had a rough year. He's already kind of turned it around with the Cowboys and the Deuce, and he had a pretty decent preseason. He knocked off the Cardinals, beat the Jets. So I think this. He's already telling me it's too late as I'm trying to preserve my friendship. But I think. I think he's going to be a surprise team, and honestly, I think he's a team that could knock off the Bears, and he actually sent the Bears to last place in the division. But I think it's going to be very competitive. I don't think the Vikings are going to go 15-1, but I do think they're going to repeat as division champs. However, this is a division where I could see being really close. I could see, something like the Vikings being 11-5, 12-4. The Lions being 10-6, and then the Packers and the Bears being like 9-7, 8-8. I mean, it's not an easy division by any stretch. I think the Lions were CPU for most of the year, and Pack had a rough stretch, so that padded it a little bit for the top end last year. But I think it's gonna be different this year. I think it's gonna be a lot tougher, and I'm interested to see how it all plays out. Sorry, Pack, I did pick you fourth, but I do think you have the opportunity to finish second in this division, as do all these teams, really. So it's going to be quite interesting to watch, and we'll see how it goes. So it's hard in these divisions that are so tough and competitive. It's kind of like the AFC South. Like, they're all four teams can be right in there in that playoff hunt, but you got to pick one of them for last. You can't pick three teams to tie for second. You got to go with what you think, and hey. That's all we got right now. You think the Lions are going to finish last? I picked the Packers. Hopefully we're both wrong. We'll see. It'll definitely be an interesting division. Moving on to the NFC South. This is my division, as everybody knows, and somehow we were 100% in sync on this one as well. That's kind of odd. We got the Panthers, Bucks, Falcons, and the Steelers. Why am I saying that? The Saints. Why did I think Steelers by looking at the Saints logo? That's very odd. But we both are in agreement on there. You tell me what you think from an outsider's perspective going on in that division. I'll tell you what I think as an insider from that division. Give me the quick rundown on the NFC South.
Well, anytime a team goes 15-1, you kind of have to say, well, they get the benefit of the doubt. Now, to be fair, for the majority of last year, the Buccaneers and the Falcons were both CPU teams. Nighthawk comes in as the Buccaneers. We know him to be fairly experienced. He's well established. He'll be able to make you compete a little bit more. Miggy, I think, is quality as well. I think he's going to be able to compete. I think he's a team that can go, 7-9, 8-8, potentially 10-6, maybe. But definitely in that, 7-9, 8-8 type of range there. Jimmy Turpelord, haven't seen too much out of him. Didn't do too terrible in the draft or in the offseason. Just haven't seen enough yet for me to say that he's better than Miggy or Nighthawk or yourself. But like I said, for the most part, 15-1, you have to go with the benefit of the doubt there. That said, I don't think you're going 15-1 this year. No offense, but no, I don't think you're going 15-1.
I wasn't trying to cut you off. I was just agreeing with you, but I guess you're done.
I said my piece.
Okay. I picked myself to win, as arrogant and as hard as that is for me to do. I did go 15-1, but it wasn't the same. Really, we had 3 CPU teams for a lot of the year, which was everybody took off and ran from my division last year, and we didn't feel until late. I will say, though, I've played Nighthawk before. I did win fairly easily in the one game at the end of the season, but he was just figuring out his team. Miggy, however, taking over the Falcons, gave me a really tough game at the end of the season, and I think the Falcons are going to be much improved. And I'm with you. We don't know what we're going to get out of Jimmy Turpelord yet. He's tweeting, or he's putting in the chat. He likes to be the underdog, and he's going to, make a run at it. He could. I don't know. I feel like they still have some holes on that team, and we'll have to see what they're able to do. I don't think his offseason was great, but at the same time, it wasn't bad. He got some decent additions in the draft, but Nighthawk's a proven commodity. He's a consistent playoff performer, and he's going to be somebody that I expect to probably be in that 10-6, 11-5 range. I would expect the Panthers. We're probably more looking at like 12-4, maybe 13-3. Our schedule's fairly rough. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we do something like 11-5 either. I mean, but I would say we're going to be like maybe a game or two ahead of the Bucks. I think the Falcons are going to be right there. I could see them anywhere from like 8-8, 10-6, and I could see them flip flopping with the Bucks. And then the Saints, I don't know yet. I mean, they're one of those teams that I could see between like 6-10 and 8-8 until we see more. We got to go with it. But, again, this could be one of those divisions where everybody's, right around 8-8 or better, and it's really tough. And I expect it to be a lot of fun, and definitely a division that is going to be fun for outsiders to watch and kind of see how it all unfolds. Can we stay on top? We traded off Christian McCaffrey. That was a big part of our offense and our special teams. We're going to have to replace that. We got couple extra picks out of it. We picked up Sidney Jones from the Eagles to try to shore up our secondary a little bit, but we're young in the secondary, so who knows? It's going to be definitely interesting. It might come back to bite us, but we're hoping it makes us better for the long term, and our division's a lot tougher now, so definitely excited to watch it from inside the division. I think you guys should be excited to watch it from the outside. So moving on, we're going to move along to the NFC East, and this is another one where we are all over the place. You've got the Redskins fourth. I've got them second. Neither one of us like the can agree on the Cowboys. The Giants are all over the place. So starting there, tell me why you think the Giants are going to repeat at the top of that division. You don't have a whole lot of faith in the Cowboys bouncing back, and then you got the Redskins falling all the way to number 4 after making the playoffs last year.
Well, I think the Giants were the biggest surprise last year. Dove kind of came out and surprised everybody. We figured Tex was going to run away with the division because he's got his Cowboys, and he kind of got off to a really slow start, had a few injuries that played into that as well, and he struggled down the stretch. Hopefully they stay healthy this year. But it's a division that's kind of a toss-up, but I really like what Dove did last year. Managed to win a lot of close games. Now, he did get blown out. We had the broadcast game for the blowout that he had to endure from Seattle. But for the majority of that game, that was tight until it got ran away from. But I really like what he did. Blah, blah, Rocky over there in Philadelphia. I like Carson Wentz. I think he's a solid quarterback. They kind of got to put things together, get the right pieces in. Where's Christian McCaffrey going to fit in with his offense? How are they planning on using him? I personally don't know a lot about Eagle DX. I haven't seen him too much. I don't have enough information to say. So until I see a little bit more out of him, I'm going to drop them somewhere in the division, mostly because I don't know what to expect out of them.
Well, honestly, I don't know what to expect a whole lot either. I do know that the Redskins were a playoff team last year, and assuming he's a competent user, I don't see why they're going to drop off a whole lot. The reason I had him jumping ahead of the Giants and the Giants falling off is late in the season last year, the Giants got off to a really strong start last year, and then all of a sudden late in the year, I don't know if it was just injuries or if it was the pressure of the playoffs looming. Like, they had a really rough time at the end of the year, and both they and the Redskins kind of backed themselves into the playoffs. And so this year, with everybody kind of having an offseason to put themselves where they want to be, I feel like Tex is going to get it together. I feel like he's going to finally stake his claim to that division. I could be wrong, though. I do think all three of those teams, though, are kind of going to be in that 9-7, 10-6 range. I think any of the three could possibly take it. But I'm going to go with the Cowboys, and I think the Giants are gonna fall just slightly behind the Redskins. But I mean, they could be in an even record and maybe win on a tie. I'm going to take the Redskins. I think the roster's a little bit better. I'm going to take them slightly over the Giants. Rocky did make the trade for Christian McCaffrey, and he is a big player. I can attest to that. And he's somebody that can be a difference maker for sure. However, that team just hasn't been able to put it together consistently. And until they can knock off some of these better teams in the division and in the conference, I think they're one of those teams that's probably 6-6, 8-8, and they're just not good enough yet to compete with the top three. But, I would love to see McCaffrey have success there and that team turn it around. So we'll definitely see, again, like all these divisions, definitely going to be an interesting division to watch. And then we'll go on to the last division and maybe the most important division, as we have the two defending AFC championship contenders in it, the Seahawks and the Cardinals. We both got them finishing 1-2 in the division. We've got the 49ers and the Rams flip-flopping. I chose one user to piss off with my predictions, and that was T. Smith. Put him last. We'll see what happens. Give us a rundown on how you see the NFC West shaking out this year.
Well, Seattle, obviously we've agreed they're the favorite. I think Arizona's going to have a fun time figuring out how they're going to utilize Lamar Jackson over there. And I'm going to be hard on Lamar all season long. So, Kyle, I'm sure you're floating around somewhere out there. Get used to it, because I am not certain about how Lamar plays out there in Arizona. But to Seattle's credit, they did fairly well. And in that Super Bowl, I had some questions offensively. Was it a miscommunication between the quarterback and the wide receivers? Now, Jay Neihart, we've seen he's competent. He's a very good user. But 3 interceptions in the Super Bowl, 1 touchdown. The only reason they really won that game is because of this potent defense. And that defense lost some pieces. That's hard to overcome. Now, they did pick up Josie Jewell, who you have made an interesting pick on. We'll see how he fits in and, if he can be that big playmaker that they need him to be defensively. For the Rams, the fact that Gurley got traded hurts. It hurts them, especially considering the fact that they didn't get Saquon. And that's devastating. But I think Minkah Fitzpatrick is a fantastic piece in this defense, a very good defense. They're changing the system up to benefit it. I think Jared Goff is going to improve a little bit further as a quarterback, not necessarily be a top-tier quarterback, but I think he'll improve. As for the 49ers, they have Saquon Barkley, they have Mason Rudolph. They've got a lot of pieces there. I just don't think there's enough to topple Arizona or Seattle. And in terms of LA, there is a chip on their shoulder because they did not get Saquon Barkley. So I think because of that, that's going to be enough to help him out there.
Yeah, the Rams are having a little bit of, a roundabout. I'm trying to fix one of our graphics here real quick. I just noticed before we bring it up that I need to fix that. So hold on. The Rams, I think that's my biggest reason for picking the Rams to drop. They traded Gurley. They thought they were going to get Saquon. The 49ers stole Saquon out from under them. Nobody thought they were going to take Saquon because they got Carlos Hyde and they need a quarterback. I think they played it smart, though. They took the best player in the draft. They also got Mason Rudolph, I believe it was, which pretty good quarterback in the second round. They kind of did what the Chargers did a few years ago by taking LT in the first round and Drew Brees in the second round. So I thought it was smart what they did. It caught us all by surprise. It left the Rams kind of reeling, but they're going to have to pick themselves up off the mat and find some kind of run game and, build around, Trace McSorley, because Jared Goff got hurt. So Trace McSorley is going to be the starting quarterback to start the season. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I think they're going to fall behind, though, and, we're going to see what the Rams can do. They said they're going to battle for the playoffs and they're going to prove everybody wrong. But until you prove it, I got an old saying, show me, don't blow me. I want to see you prove it on the field before I believe what you're saying off of it. So as far as the top two, I'm with you. I think we were all kind of rooting for the demise of the Seahawks. That defense was just insane last year. And, we were all kind of hoping that they were going to lose some spots and the dominance was going to fall off. And then they just have a ton of picks following them in the draft. Josie Jewell being one of them, who was one of the bigger sleeper picks, I think. He fits exactly what they need, which is a coverage linebacker, and I think he's going to fit in really well there. That was one area that they thought they were going to fall off, and teams had an area that they could attack, and I think they filled it with Jewell, so definitely going to be interesting to watch. They had a good offseason, good draft. They added Bryce Love. They had like 7 running backs at one time. I think I saw that they cut J.D. McKissick. I don't know if that was intentional or not. But he was a big part of that Super Bowl run. But they added Bryce Love. They got Josie Jewell. Like they added everywhere they fell off theoretically, and I don't see them falling off at the top of the division. I don't think they're going to go 15-1 though. I think we saw enough flaws in their game throughout the course of the season that people now have a roadmap to beat them, but it's not going to be easy. If Russell Wilson continues to struggle at times, and eventually those DBs aren't going to drop all of those interceptions, so they're going to drop a few here and there, but I still think they're going to. They're still going to win the division. I think the Cardinals will be close behind. I think this is right now a 2-team division. Those two are clearly at the top, and the Niners, until proven otherwise, and the Rams are clearly at the bottom. But I think I'm looking at probably something like 12-4, 13-3 for the Seahawks, and maybe 11-5, 12-4 for the Cardinals, and they're both going to be players in the playoffs, I would imagine. So definitely going to be an interesting division to watch. I hope the Rams and 49ers prove me wrong. We never like to see teams at the bottom, but you never know. Sometimes you got to be at the bottom, and a couple of drafts, he turns you around. So either way, you got an opportunity, and it's going to be tough with the two teams at the top, but definitely going to be interesting to watch. So as we move away from the divisions, we're going to go on to our picks for the league MVP, and the rookies are coming up next. Just a quick note for you guys that are watching. We will advance after the show, probably be a little bit after. There's some league issues we got to clean up real quick before we advance, so it could be as late as 11. We might be an hour behind, but we will try to get it advanced as quick as possible. We just got to make sure all of our ducks are in a row before we do. But with that being said, we look at the MVP race here. You've got Russell Wilson, who most of the year was up there around the record for QB rating, and then kind of struggled in the playoffs. Had some hits and misses, but you got him repeating a solid regular season, being MVP. I got Deshaun Watson. Tell us why you picked Russell Wilson, David.
I think they clean up the mess a little bit, and I think the addition of Bryce Love and the running backs that they have in that carousel, I think it takes some of the pressure off Russell Wilson last year, and we saw it in the Super Bowl. He was trying to make a lot of plays and trying to force plays. I think this year he starts playing smarter. He gets some of his messes and inconsistencies cleaned up. I think he'll be able to play consistently at a higher level than what he did last year.
I don't know. It's so hard. He had such a great regular season, but then the playoffs were such a struggle for him, but they still wind up winning, and it was mostly because of the defense. Wilson had that big throw, though, if you remember, on 3rd and long in the Super Bowl. Everybody thought they were going to run it, try to take some more time off the clock. He goes with the post route deep down the middle, completes it, and pretty much sealed the win. So obviously he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's capable of making big plays. But at the same time, they've got a lot of pieces on offense. I don't think they have to rely on Russell Wilson. So I went with Deshaun Watson. He was the reigning AFC Rookie of the Year, and I think he's going to take a step up. He got a lot of points in the offseason, was able to increase his attributes. They made it to the Super Bowl. I think he's going to have another year. They definitely like to throw the ball and move it around, even though they've got Lamar Miller and Deontay Foreman. They like to throw it through the air, and they've got quality receivers. So I think Watson statistically is going to probably wind up taking it, but there's a lot of quality guys out there that could run away with it. So I'm definitely interested to see how that plays out. Moving on to the rookies, we're going to differ a little bit here. You went with Baker Mayfield with the Jets. I'm taking Darius Guice, which I know is a little bit of a surprise pick. I just know Nighthawk and what he likes to do. He likes to run the ball. I know they got Charles Sims and the Muscle Hamster, which I know he does. Doug Martin doesn't like that name, but I know he's got a 3-headed monster and he's going to use them, but I do think Guice is going to wind up stepping up and being the guy that kind of winds up leading it down the road. It's going to be too tempting knowing that Martin and Sims are going to leave eventually not to make Guice the feature back. So I think he's going to wind up running away with it. I think it's going to be close, though. I think there's a lot of guys in that division. You've got guys like Minka Fitzpatrick in L.A. I think he could step up. It's going to be kind of hard. Josie Jewell, well, actually, those are defenses. We're only on offense. I'm getting ahead of myself. But there's a lot of guys out there. There's some quarterbacks out there. Bryce Love, who knows? He could step up with the Seahawks. But I do think Guice is going to be the guy that jumps up and takes it. But I think it's going to be a close race, and it's going to be down to the wire and definitely interesting. Why did you take Baker Mayfield? I think I know why. He's the best quarterback in the draft. But you tell me why you went with Baker Mayfield and how you think he's going to lead the Jets and why you don't think he's going to lead them in the first place in that division.
Well, I think the biggest thing that the Jets had last year, and you mentioned it earlier, was all the inconsistencies that they had going on at quarterback, and I think Baker Mayfield brings a level of consistency. The only thing that you have to remember that with rookie quarterbacks, there's some growing pains here and there. Baker Mayfield's going to make a couple of mistakes. He's going to make enough mistakes that I think it can hurt his chances of helping his team win the division. But I think that his big playability, despite his size, we've seen Russell Wilson show it off as well for his size. I think in spite of that, his big playability, his IQ, his reads, his accuracy, his versatility, I think all those things will help Baker Mayfield just blow everybody away. I think we're in for a surprise with Baker Mayfield.
I agree with you. The AFC, I 100% think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. We were just going with one player overall, but I 100% think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to, like I said in the division roundup, I think he's the missing link for that team. Worm Reaver is a guy that likes to play ball control, doesn't get really, really fancy with things. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes. And if you remember, Baker Mayfield was the top-rated quarterback by PFF the last 2 years, and he was in top 5 in all of the accuracies on PFF. He's the quarterback that's most ready to come in right now and make a difference, and I think he's in a spot where they don't necessarily have the greatest weapons around him, but he's on a team with a good owner that can use him effectively. His athleticism is going to make him a threat running around. So I think overall, I think you're right. I think he will wind up being the AFC Offensive Rookie of the Year. I still going with Weiss in the NFC and as the overall Rookie of the Year. Moving on to the defense. Oh, that one I didn't get formatted right either, but we can fix that, no problem. You've got Minkah Fitzpatrick as the number 1 overall rookie on defense. I've got Josie Jewell. I'll let you go first. Tell us why Minkah's going to win it.
I think Minkah provides something that LA has needed for a while. I know they didn't get Saquon, and we talked about that coming in, but I think Minkah is a good quality pick that they got at number 2, and I think he's going to make a lot of big plays and or at least have a lot of mistakes forced his direction that will help him out. We saw Russell Wilson force a couple of passes. He forced a couple passes towards Minkah Fitzpatrick. You're going to be looking at pick sixes, and that's somebody that is a good pick because of who they're dealing with in the division. Lamar Jackson is untrained. Carson Palmer, if he plays or however they're going to have that quarterback situation in Arizona, Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to be able to eat them alive. He's a corner that you're going to want to avoid down the stretch. You don't really want to be inaccurate if you're throwing it his way. You throw it to him, and he comes down with it. He has the opportunity and the potential to turn that into 6 points.
You put a lot of thought in this. I'll give you credit for that. You make some good points with Russell. Having his troubles last year throwing at the defense and them dropping it. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to drop him. I think he's going to hold on to him. I think he could be one of those guys that makes a little bit of a difference in some of those games. Same thing with Lamar Jackson. I'm with you. I'm not super high on the rookie this year. I think he can turn into a good quarterback down the road, but I think he's somebody that it's going to take a couple of seasons. Right now, his biggest threat is his wheels, and his accuracy definitely is something to be desired. And I do feel he's going to have some issues with the turnovers, and Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to be one of those that is probably going to benefit. Josie Jewell, however, I think is going to be another one that's going to benefit. And the reason I picked him is, as we saw last year, Bobby Wagner had 11 regular season interceptions with the Seahawks. Josie Jewell added to that defense, I think, is going to be somebody that's going to get a lot of interceptions in the middle of that defense. For some reason, guys love throwing to their linebackers, and I think he's going to be sitting in there in some of those cover 3 zones and cover 2 zones that they play, and he's going to pick off some passes. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's going to have something like 5 or 6 interceptions as a linebacker in his rookie season, and he's going to wind up coming away with the Rookie of the Year award. So that pretty much wraps it up. We will get down to our final thoughts. First off, I want to say everybody that tuned in, most of the league was here, so I don't want to try to go through everybody that I saw, but I appreciate everybody tuning out. Had a great tune out. You guys seemed to really like it in the chat, so we're glad everybody was entertained by it and excited to get into season 2. David, any final thoughts before we get out of here on anything that we didn't cover and what you're most excited to see this year?
I think one of the biggest things I'm excited to see is not only how these rookie quarterbacks play out that we've seen brought in, Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold, obviously, he's sitting for a little bit, but Baker Mayfield, I'm excited to see them. But I'm also excited to see how last year rookies take the next step moving forward. I think that'll be interesting, and what teams will surprise us. We mentioned a few dark horse teams throughout the program. I think that the potential that they have to make a few jumps, I'm excited to see if they can pull that off. There's a lot riding on it.
It's going to be a fun season. I do also want to give credit to Burns, who provided the graphics for us tonight. That was a huge help, as it was something I did not have to come up with. That background with the logo on the concrete, I think is fire. I love that. I can't wait to use that more. So definitely shout out to Burns for the graphics. And again, David, thank you for all the work that you put in. You always are very knowledgeable on your picks, and you really put a lot of time into them. So everybody definitely appreciates that, and it always adds to everything that we do with the insight that you give us. So wrapping everything up, again, we will advance soon. I got to look over everything, make sure we got all our ducks in a row before we advance. Make sure we got all the stuff up. I think there might be a couple of sanctions coming down, so we got to make sure we get them squared away. But look for in the next hour for sure, if not the next 30 minutes, for us to get on to Season 2 of Madden 18. It should be a fantastic season. I am pumped up and excited about it. And we just confirmed earlier tonight, tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, we have our first play-by-play game of Season 2. It's going to feature the Cowboys and the New Look Bucks squaring off in Week 1. So you guys be sure to tune in for that. So, as always, for David Roy, I'm your host, Mike Peters. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We can't wait to get the season started. We will see you guys on Discord.